never thought I'd discover my husband's affair during what should have been one of the happiest moments of our lives. But there I was, standing in the hospital parking lot, ultrasound photos clutched in my trembling hand, watching James kiss his secretary against her car, on the very day we were supposed to find out our baby's gender. The baby he had claimed he couldn't see because of an emergency meeting that simply couldn't wait. As they embraced without a care in the world, completely unaware of my presence, I felt something inside me shift. Not just the tiny kicks of my unborn daughter, but something deeper. A resolve forming where my heart was breaking. I'd spent 5 years building a life with James Morgan. 5 years believing we were partners in everything. Now, as I stood, frozen between rows of parked cars, I understood with sudden clarity that the late-night calls, the weekend conferences, and the subtle emotional distance had nothing to do with his advancing career at Bennett Law Associates. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. They had everything to do with Vanessa Parker, his perfectly polished executive assistant, whose lipstick was currently smudged across my husband's mouth. The ultrasound technician had been so kind earlier, apologizing when James hadn't shown up. First baby jitters, she'd suggested sympathetically. Some dads get overwhelmed. I'd nodded and smiled, making excuses for him even then. When she'd asked if I wanted to know the gender, I'd hesitated before saying yes. After all, we'd promised to discover it together. But something, intuition perhaps, had prompted me to go ahead without him. "It's a girl," she'd said with a warm smile. "A perfectly healthy baby girl." I'd cried then, blaming hormones rather than the growing suspicion that I would be raising this child alone. Now, watching James check his watch before giving Vanessa one final kiss, I understood exactly where I stood in my husband's priorities. Somewhere far below his ambitious career goals and his affair with his 27-year-old assistant. I took a single photo with my phone, capturing their embrace with the hospital building clearly visible in the background. Then I quietly got into my car and drove away, my mind racing with what would come next. The story of how my marriage unraveled begins long before that devastating moment in the hospital parking lot. My name is Elizabeth Chen, though everyone calls me Ellie. I met James Morgan during my final year of business school, where I was completing my MBA with a focus on commercial real estate development. He was in his second year of law school, handsome and charismatic, with the kind of confidence that filled any room he entered. Our connection was immediate and intense, the kind of whirlwind romance that made friends comment about how perfectly matched we seemed. What James didn't know when we met was that I came from a family with deep roots in Boston's real estate market. My father, Richard Chen, had built Chen Holdings from a small property management company into one of the city's most respected commercial real estate firms. My mother, Grace, had been the financial strategist behind their success, teaching me from an early age about investment principles and market analysis. They had raised me to be independent, strategic, and forward-thinking, qualities that would ultimately save me when my marriage collapsed. After graduation, while James pursued his law career with single-minded determination, I joined my family's business, not as the boss's daughter with a token position, but as a junior development associate who worked my way through every department. I learned construction management by spending 6 months in hard hats and work boots. I mastered lease negotiations by sitting beside our top leasing agents for a year. By the time James and I married 3 years after we met, I had earned my place as Chen Holdings Director of Acquisitions. James always seemed proud of my career, at least in public. He enjoyed introducing me as his powerhouse wife at firm functions, explaining to colleagues how I transformed underperforming properties into profitable investments. But in private, he subtly undermined my accomplishments. "It's easier when it's the family business," he'd say with a dismissive smile. Or, "Your father would never let you fail." These comments stung, but I brushed them aside, attributing them to his own insecurities as he struggled to make partner at his firm. When we decided to start a family, James suggested I scale back my professional responsibilities. Pregnancy is stressful enough without property development deadlines, he'd insisted, his concern seeming genuine. Besides, the business will always be there. Wanting to be a good mother and supportive wife, I agreed to reduce my workload, transitioning to a role that allowed more flexibility. What I didn't tell James was that this new role actually gave me greater authority over our investment strategy, even if it came with fewer site visits and client meetings. The irony wasn't lost on me that as my pregnancy progressed, James became increasingly absent. Each trimester seemed to bring a new level of disconnect. During the first, he blamed an important case that required late nights at the office. By the second, weekend work became routine. When I entered my third trimester, overnight business trips to New York became frequent occurrences. I began to notice other changes too. A new cologne I didn't recognize, mysterious credit card charges at restaurants we'd never visited, and the way he would take calls in another room, speaking in hushed tones. Throughout it all, I maintained a careful emotional balance, focusing on my pregnancy and my work, rather than the growing suspicion that my marriage was fracturing. The acquisition that would ultimately change everything came about 4 months into my pregnancy, when my father brought a unique opportunity to my attention. The waterfront plaza is coming on the market, he'd announced during our weekly strategy meeting. The current owners are facing a liquidity crisis and need to sell quickly. The property was a stunning 10-story office building in Boston's Seaport District, recently renovated with state-of-the-art amenities. Its tenant list included some of the city's most prestigious law firms, including, in a twist of fate I couldn't have scripted better myself, Bennett Law Associates, where James had worked for the past 7 years. It's significantly undervalued. Given the panic sale, my father continued, sliding the prospectus across the table. But there's a catch. They want absolute confidentiality until the deal closes. No announcements, no press releases. Why the secrecy? I asked, already intrigued by the possibilities. The owners are concerned about spooking current tenants. If word gets out that they're in financial trouble, it could trigger lease reviews or early exit negotiations. I studied the financials, immediately recognizing the opportunity. We'll need to create a separate LLC for this. Keep the Chen name out of it entirely. My father smiled, pride evident in his expression. Exactly what I was thinking. I'd like you to take the lead on this, Ellie. Structure the deal however you think best. That evening, when James asked about my day, I mentioned a potential new property without specifics. He nodded absently, clearly uninterested in the details of my work. "That's nice, honey," he said, eyes never leaving his phone. "Bennett's looking at new office space, too. Probably time to upgrade now that I'm on the partner track." I felt a flicker of something, not quite amusement, not quite vindication, knowing that the new office space his firm might be considering was actually about to become mine. "Oh? What locations are they looking at?" I asked casually. "Not sure yet. I'm on the committee, though. It's a good sign they trust my judgment." He finally looked up. "You wouldn't understand the politics involved. Law firms are complicated businesses." I bit back a response about the complexities of 9-figure real estate acquisitions and simply smiled. "I'm sure you'll find something suitable." Over the next few weeks, I created Harborview Properties LLC, a wholly owned subsidiary of Cheney Holdings with myself as the managing director. We moved quickly but cautiously, arranging financing, conducting due diligence, and negotiating terms. Throughout the process, I maintained absolute secrecy, not just because of the seller's requirements, but because I was beginning to formulate a longer-term strategy, one that would protect both my professional interests and my personal future. The waterfront plaza acquisition closed exactly 8 days before I discovered James and Vanessa in the hospital parking lot. The timing couldn't have been more fortuitous. While I had no way of knowing my marriage was about to implode, I had positioned myself perfectly to weather whatever storm might come. The evening after my devastating discovery, I returned home before James, my mind clear despite the emotional turmoil. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I prepared dinner as I normally would, changed into comfortable clothes that accommodated my growing belly, and set the table for two. When he arrived home, his tie loosened and hair slightly disheveled, I noticed the faint scent of unfamiliar perfume clinging to his shirt collar. "How was your day?" I asked, setting a plate of his favorite pasta in front of him. "Exhausting," he sighed dramatically. "The Wilson case is turning into a nightmare. I had to cancel everything to handle an emergency filing." He reached for his wine glass, avoiding my eyes. "How was yours? Sorry about the appointment." "It was illuminating," I replied truthfully. "The doctor said everything looks perfect. Healthy development, all measurements on track." "Did you find out if it's a boy or girl?" he asked, his momentary enthusiasm seeming genuine. I hesitated, the ultrasound photos burning a hole in my purse where I'd tucked them away. "They couldn't tell for sure," I lied. "The baby wasn't positioned right. We'll have to wait until next time." "That's disappointing," he frowned. "I was hoping to start planning the nursery this weekend." "Speaking of planning," I said, carefully steering the conversation, "how's the office space search coming along? Any promising locations?" James immediately brightened, always eager to discuss his professional achievements. "Actually, yes. The committee is focusing on the waterfront plaza. Premium building, excellent location. The managing partner is impressed with my input so far." "The waterfront plaza?" I repeated innocently. "Isn't that where you are now?" "Yes, but we'd expand to another floor. More corner offices, better conference facilities." He leaned forward, animated now. "Between us, I'm fairly certain one of those corner offices has my name on it. The partner announcement should come through within the month." I nodded appreciatively, maintaining the supportive wife facade while mentally calculating my next moves. "That sounds wonderful, James. You deserve it after all your hard work." Over the next 3 days, I proceeded with methodical precision, dividing my tasks between personal preparation and professional positioning. During the day, while James was at the office, or wherever he was actually spending his time, I gathered essential documents, birth certificates, financial records, insurance policies, and secured them in a safety deposit box at a bank unknown to my husband. I transferred my personal funds to a new account, took inventory of valuable possessions with sentimental significance, and consulted discreetly with Diana Reed, a divorce attorney known for her strategic approach to high net worth separations. "Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state," Diana explained during our first meeting, her office chosen specifically because it was across town from James's legal circles. "That doesn't necessarily mean a 50-50 split, but rather what the court deems fair given all circumstances." "The prenup should protect my family's assets," I noted, sliding the agreement across her desk. James had signed it without much negotiation. Before our wedding, confident that his future earnings as a top attorney would exceed anything I might inherit. Diana reviewed the document, nodding approvingly. "This is solid. Your family's business interests are well protected." She looked up, eyes sharp. "But we still need to document the infidelity. The photo is a good start, but more evidence would strengthen our position." "I understand," I replied. "I'll handle that part." On the professional front, I arranged a meeting with Bernard Hoffman, the managing partner at Bennett Law Associates, ostensibly as the representative of Harbor View Properties, the new owner of their building. I chose a private dining room at an exclusive restaurant for this conversation, ensuring both privacy and a certain power dynamic. Bernard arrived promptly, clearly curious about this mysterious meeting with the new landlord. I had deliberately arranged for him to be seated, first allowing me to make an entrance. The momentary confusion on his face when I walked in, visibly pregnant and familiar as his employee's wife, quickly shifted to cautious neutrality. "Mrs. Morgan," he began, standing to greet me. "I wasn't expecting—" "Ms. Chen, professionally," I corrected gently, extending my hand. "Though you know me as Ellie Morgan, I operate in business under my maiden name." "I don't understand," he said, resuming his seat. "The invitation said Harbor View Properties." "That's correct. I'm the managing director of Harbor View, which recently acquired the waterfront plaza." I placed my business card on the table, watching as he processed this information. "We're meeting with all major tenants to discuss transition plans and future space needs." Bernard studied my card, then looked up with new assessment in his eyes. "I was unaware of your professional background." "Many people are," I replied. Simply, "including my husband." Understanding dawned on his face. "James doesn't know." "No, and I'd appreciate your discretion for the moment. This meeting is strictly business." I opened a portfolio containing lease documents and building plans. "Bennett Law has been an excellent tenant. We're interested in continuing that relationship under mutually beneficial terms." For the next hour, we discussed their lease, which had 3 years remaining with an option to renew. Bernard explained their expansion needs, and I outlined potential accommodations. All standard landlord-tenant negotiations conducted with professional courtesy. Only at the end, as coffee was served, did I gently shift the conversation. "There's one additional matter," I said, my tone remaining businesslike. "It concerns one of your senior associates and his executive assistant." Bernard's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Ms. Chen, if this is it's a professional concern regarding appropriate use of office resources and spaces," I interrupted smoothly. "Our building management team has noted after-hours access patterns that raise questions about professional boundaries. As your landlord, we have certain liability considerations." I slid an envelope across the table containing printouts of building security logs showing James and Vanessa's after-hours access to empty conference rooms and tenant lounges, carefully highlighted to show the pattern. These weren't conclusive, evidence of an affair, but they painted a suggestive picture of two people spending unnecessary time alone together outside business hours. "I see," Bernard said after reviewing the documents. His expression had hardened into something between disappointment and anger. "I appreciate this being brought to my attention discreetly. Bennett Law has a strict policy regarding interpersonal relationships between supervisors and their reports." "I thought it might," I replied. "As I said, this is primarily a liability concern from the building management perspective. How you address it internally is, of course, your decision." As we concluded our meeting, Bernard regarded me with what seemed like newfound respect. "You've handled this with remarkable professionalism, Ms. Chen. Not many would separate personal and business matters so effectively." "Some situations require compartmentalization," I answered, gathering my materials. "I've found it's usually the best approach to complex problems." What I didn't share with Bernard was that I had already directed our property management team to begin planning extensive renovations to Bennett Law's floor, renovations that would require temporary office relocations within the building. Nor did I mention that as the managing director, I would have considerable influence over which attorneys received priority space assignments during this disruption. By the time I returned home that evening, I had put all the pieces in place. The only remaining step was to determine exactly how and when to reveal the truth to James. That opportunity presented itself sooner than expected when he called to announce he'd be working late again. "The Wilson brief needs to be finished tonight," he explained, the background noise suggesting he was already out of the office. "Don't wait up." "Actually," I said, "I need you home by 7. We have something important to discuss." Can it wait until tomorrow? This is really time-sensitive. More time-sensitive than our marriage? I asked, my voice calm despite the directness of the question. The silence that followed told me everything. What does that mean? He finally responded, wariness evident in his tone. It means I expect you home at 7, James. We can either have this conversation privately tonight, or we can have it very publicly tomorrow. Your choice. He arrived at 6:58, his expression a mixture of irritation and apprehension. I had set the dining room, table with care, place settings, water glasses, and a single manila envelope at his usual spot. No dinner had been prepared. "What's going on, Ellie?" he demanded as he tossed his keys on the sideboard. "What was that cryptic ultimatum about?" "Sit down, please," I said, already seated at the head of the table where he usually sat. This small detail, my occupation of his preferred position, wasn't lost on him. His jaw tightened as he took the adjacent chair. "Open the envelope," I instructed. Inside were 3 items: the hospital parking lot photo showing him kissing Vanessa, a copy of the building security logs, and a formal letter on Harborview Properties letterhead identifying me as the managing director and new owner of the waterfront plaza. I watched his face as he processed each document, emotions cycling rapidly from shock to guilt to confusion, and finally to a dawning horror as he connected the dots. "You own the building," he whispered, looking up at me with disbelief. "How is that possible?" "Through careful investment strategy and exceptional timing," I replied. Chen Holdings acquired it through a subsidiary LLC last month. The same building where you've been conducting your affair with Vanessa in conference rooms after hours. He flinched at the directness of my accusation but didn't deny it. Instead, his legal mind immediately jumped to implications. "Does Bernard know about this? About us?" "Bernard is aware that his firm's landlord has concerns about appropriate use of building facilities," I said evenly. "He's also aware of Bennett Law's policies regarding supervisor-subordinate relationships. What actions he takes with that information is his decision." James ran a hand through his hair, visibly calculating his position. "Look, I can explain about Vanessa. It's not what you think." "I saw you kissing her at the hospital," I interrupted, my voice finally betraying emotion. "The day of our babies. Ultrasound. The appointment you missed for an emergency filing that apparently required lipstick." He had the decency to look ashamed, if only briefly. "It was a mistake. A stupid mistake that got out of hand." "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, James. Carrying on an affair with your secretary for months while your wife is pregnant is a choice. A series of deliberate choices, actually." His expression hardened, defensiveness replacing shame. "So, what now? Is this some kind of power play? You own my firm's building, so you think you control me?" "I don't want to control you," I said. Truthfully, "I want a divorce." The word hung in the air between us, weighty and final. For a moment, he seemed genuinely stunned, as if despite the evidence before him, he hadn't expected this outcome. "You can't be serious," he finally said. "We're about to have a baby. You want to break up our family before it even starts?" "You broke this family, James. I'm simply acknowledging the reality." I placed a second envelope on the table. "These are separation terms drafted by my attorney. They're reasonable, fair, and discreet. Sign them, and we handle this privately. Fight me, and I'll be forced to use every resource at my disposal to protect myself and our daughter." "Daughter?" he repeated, momentarily distracted. "It's a girl?" "Yes, the ultrasound was perfectly clear despite what I told you. I've been calling her Lily in my mind." Something like genuine regret flashed across his face. "Ellie, please. We can work through this. Couples therapy, a fresh start. I'll end things with Vanessa immediately. She doesn't mean anything." "That's actually worse, not better," I observed. "And no, we can't work through this. Not because the betrayal is unforgivable, though it is significant. We can't work through this because I've realized our entire relationship was built on a fundamental misunderstanding. What are you talking about? You never saw me, James. Not really. You saw the supportive wife, the future mother of your children, the pleasant dinner companion for firm functions. But you never saw me, my capabilities, my intelligence, my professional accomplishments. You diminished them at every turn because they didn't fit your narrative. He started to protest, but I held up my hand, continuing. Even now, learning that I orchestrated a multi-million-dollar acquisition under your nose, your first thought is how it affects you and your firm's lease, not how I managed it or what it means for my career. That's not fair, he argued weakly. It's entirely fair. And it's why, regardless of the affair, we would have eventually reached this point. You need someone who exists in relation to you, supporting your goals, admiring your achievements. I need a partner who sees me as a whole person with my own ambitions and strengths. I stood then, signaling the end of our conversation. Review the separation agreement with your attorney if you wish, though I should mention Diana Reed drafted it, and she's quite thorough. You have 48 hours to sign, after which the terms become significantly less generous. And if I refuse? He challenged, his attorney instincts finally kicking in. Then I exercise my rights as your landlord to begin immediate renovations on Bennett Law's floor. I believe your office specifically would make an excellent business center for all building tenants. Think of the foot traffic through what was once your private space. I placed my hand on my stomach as the baby kicked, a reminder of what truly mattered in this situation. I'd prefer to keep business and personal matters separate, James, but that choice is yours. As I left the dining room, I heard him call, "After me." You've changed, Ellie. I don't even recognize you anymore. I paused in the doorway, considering this. I haven't changed, James. I've simply stopped hiding who I've always been. The difference is significant. That night, I slept in the guest room, surrounded by pillows that supported my pregnant body and plans that protected my future. For the first time in months, I felt completely at peace with what was coming next. Not because I had orchestrated the perfect revenge, though there was certainly satisfaction in that, but because I had reclaimed my identity and set the stage for a life defined by my own choices rather than someone else's betrayal. The following morning, I woke to the sound of the front door closing. James had left early without attempting to speak with me, a small mercy I appreciated. I had no desire for tearful apologies or angry accusations. We'd moved beyond that point. Now it was simply a matter of executing the transition with minimal drama and maximum efficiency. I checked my phone to find 3 messages from my father. The first 2 expressed concern about my cryptic text from the night before, while the third was more business-oriented. Bernard Hoffman called. Wants to discuss tenant relations. Call when you can. I smiled despite myself. Bernard hadn't wasted any time addressing the situation. When I returned my father's call, his first question confirmed my suspicion. Ellie, what exactly did you discuss with Bernard Hoffman yesterday? He seemed unusually interested in our management policies regarding tenant conduct. I simply raised some concerns about appropriate use of building facilities, I replied. Nothing that would impact our agreement with Bennett Law. My father's silence spoke volumes. After raising me and working alongside me for years, he knew when I was being deliberately vague. Does this have something to do with James? Yes, I admitted, but I'd prefer to explain in person. Are you free for lunch? I'll clear my schedule. 3 hours later, we sat in his private office. The door closed to ensure our conversation remained confidential. I laid out the entire situation: James's affair, my discovery at the hospital, the evidence of their after-hours meetings in the building, and my subsequent actions. Throughout my explanation, my father's expression remained carefully neutral. though his knuckles whitened around his coffee cup when I described seeing James and Vanessa kissing in the parking lot. "I should have seen this coming," he finally said when I'd finished. The signs were there. "You couldn't have known," I assured him. "I didn't want to see it either." "What do you need from me, Ellie?" "Whatever it is, it's yours." His immediate, unquestioning support brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Throughout my life, my father had been my strongest advocate, believing in my capabilities even when others dismissed them. His confidence in me now, during this personal crisis, reinforced my determination to handle the situation with the same professionalism I brought to every business challenge. "I need operational authority over the waterfront plaza management. Decisions for the next few months," I said, particularly regarding the planned renovations to Bennett Law's floor. My father nodded, understanding exactly what I was requesting. "Consider it done. The property management team will take direction from you exclusively. And I'll need some time away from regular duties as my due date approaches. I've drafted a transition plan for my other projects." "Already approved," he assured me. "Your mother and I have been expecting that request, though not under these circumstances." He hesitated, then added gently, "Have you told her about James?" "Not yet," I admitted. "I wanted to have everything in place first. You know how protective she gets." He smiled slightly. "Your mother's first instinct will be to demolish the building with James inside it. Best to present her with your measured approach first." "I'll tell her tonight," I promised. "And Dad, thank you for understanding. I've always understood you, Ellie, even when others didn't." The unspoken reference to James hung between us. "You're handling this with remarkable grace. I'm proud of you." That afternoon, I received a text from Bernard Hoffman requesting another meeting, this time at his office. The formality of the invitation suggested a shift in our dynamic, from landlord-tenant to something more complex. Bennett Law occupied the top 3 floors of the waterfront plaza, with the senior partners' offices situated along the building's eastern facade, providing spectacular views of Boston Harbor. Bernard's corner office was particularly impressive, with floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 sides, creating a sense of suspended animation above the water. As his assistant showed me in, I noticed the difference in how they received me now. No longer just James Morgan's pregnant wife, but Ms. Chen, the building owner with significant influence over their professional environment. "Ms. Chen, thank you for coming," Bernard said, rising from behind his massive desk. "Please, have a seat. Can I offer you anything? Water? Tea?" "Water would be fine, thank you," I replied, easing myself into the visitor's chair. At 7 months, pregnant, every movement required more deliberation than it once had. Once his assistant had provided refreshments and closed the door, Bernard's professional veneer softened slightly. "I want to begin by saying that I deeply regret the situation you've been placed in. Bennett Law values integrity above all else, both professionally and personally." "I appreciate that, Mr. Hoffman. But as I mentioned yesterday, I prefer to keep personal and business matters separate." "As do I," he agreed, "which is precisely why I've asked you here today. There have been some personnel changes that may affect our tenant-landlord relationship, and I wanted to inform you directly." I took a sip of water, waiting for him to continue. "Effective immediately, James Morgan has been placed on administrative leave pending an ethics committee review. His executive assistant, Vanessa Parker, has resigned her position." His tone remained carefully neutral. "These decisions were made based solely on firm policy regarding workplace relationships, not any external factors." "I understand," I said, equally careful with my phrasing. "Harborview Properties respects your internal management decisions. We're committed to maintaining positive relations with all our tenants." "That's reassuring to hear," Bernard replied, "particularly given the unique circumstances. May I ask what will happen to James's office during his leave? I inquired, my tone professionally curious rather than personally invested. It will remain vacant until the committee reaches a decision. He hesitated. Which brings me to another matter. I understand renovations are planned for our floor in the coming months? I nodded. Yes, the HVAC system requires a comprehensive upgrade. Our property management team has developed a phased approach to minimize disruption to tenants. We'd appreciate prioritizing areas other than the senior associates' offices if possible, Bernard said, given the sensitivity of our ongoing cases. I pretended to consider this request, though I had anticipated it. I believe that could be arranged with one exception. The northwest corner of your floor, where James's office is located, will need to be addressed first due to the main ventilation trunk location. Bernard's expression registered recognition of the subtle power dynamic at play. I wasn't being vindictive, merely practical, and he couldn't reasonably object. I see, he said finally. Well, as that office will be vacant anyway, I suppose. It's not a significant concern. Exactly, I agreed pleasantly. We'll ensure minimal disruption to your active personnel. As our meeting concluded, Bernard walked me to the elevator, maintaining the professional courtesy appropriate for an important business relationship. Just before the doors opened, he spoke in a lower tone. Off the record, Ms. Chen. What happens with James going forward is entirely the firm's decision, but I value your perspective as someone who might have insights we lack. Would you have any recommendations regarding his future here? The question surprised me. Bernard was essentially asking for my blessing or condemnation regarding James's continued employment. The power to significantly impact my husband's career now rested squarely in my hands. I considered my response carefully. Despite the pain James had caused me, I didn't want vengeance. I wanted justice, yes, but more importantly, I wanted freedom from both the relationship and the emotional burden of bitterness. Mr. Hoffman, James is an excellent attorney. His personal choices have been disappointing, but his professional capabilities remain valuable to your firm. That said, I believe people function best when their environment reflects their actions and choices. I met his gaze directly. If he remains with Bennett Law, I would suggest a position commensurate with the trust he has demonstrated. Bernard nodded slowly, understanding my meaning perfectly. Thank you for your candor, Ms. Chen. It's been illuminating. As the elevator doors closed between us, I exhaled slowly, one hand resting on my belly where Lily was particularly active today. The conversation had been another step in establishing my new reality, one where I was recognized for my professional identity rather than my marital status. When I returned home that evening, I found James waiting in the living room. The separation agreement spread across the coffee table before him. His appearance was uncharacteristically disheveled, tie loosened, hair mussed as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly, eyes bloodshot from either lack of sleep or excess alcohol. Possibly both. Administrative leave, he said, without preamble. After 7 years of billing more hours than anyone in my class, they've put me on administrative leave. Did you plan that too? Hello to you too, James, I replied calmly, setting my purse down and easing onto the opposite sofa. I didn't orchestrate your leave. That was Bernard's decision based on firm policy. After you showed him building security logs, he countered bitterly. After I brought a liability concern to our tenant's attention, I corrected. The rest was entirely his choice based on your actions, much like our current situation. He gestured angrily at the documents before him. This agreement is punitive. Your lawyer is using my indiscretion to take everything. The agreement is precisely what the prenuptial stipulates in case of infidelity, plus standard child support. Nothing more, nothing less. I kept my voice level, refusing to match his emotional tone. You're an attorney, James. You understood the terms when you signed them. I never thought that those terms would apply to you. I finished for him. Most people don't anticipate the consequences of their actions until they're facing them directly. He slumped back against the couch, the fight suddenly draining from him. Vanessa quit. I heard. She said she couldn't handle the scandal, that she needed a fresh start somewhere else. His laugh was hollow. Turns out she had an offer from Harrison and Wade already lined up. Been interviewing with them for weeks. I felt a flicker of something. Not quite pity, but a recognition of the particular pain that comes with discovering you've been used rather than valued. I had experienced it myself, after all. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. Whatever James had done, watching him confront the shallow nature of his affair brought me no satisfaction. He looked up, clearly surprised by my sincerity. Are you? Yes. Being betrayed by someone you trusted is painful. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I let that statement hang between us for a moment. Have you reviewed the full agreement? He nodded, gesturing toward the signature pages. I'll sign it. Not because it's fair, but because fighting you would cost more than I can afford right now. It's fair, James. It follows exactly what we agreed to before marriage. The only addition is the visitation schedule for Lily, which is standard for newborns. Lily, he repeated, testing the name. You've really been thinking of her as Lily all this time? Lily Grace Chen, I confirmed. After my mother. Not Morgan? No, she'll carry my family name. He didn't argue, which surprised, me. Instead, he picked up the pen and signed each flagged page with deliberate strokes before sliding the document across the coffee table toward me. What happens now? He asked, suddenly looking lost in a way I'd never seen before. James had always been so certain of his path, so confident in his decisions. Now he sat before me, unmoored and seemingly adrift. Now we proceed with the formal filing. Diana will handle everything. I gathered the signed pages carefully. As for living arrangements, I've found an apartment nearby. I'll be moving this weekend. You're leaving? I assumed I would be the one to go. This place has always been more yours than mine, I explained. The new apartment is better suited to my needs now. Single level, better security, closer to my parents for when the baby comes. He nodded, accepting this decision without protest. And the baby. Lily. When is she due exactly? 8 weeks from yesterday, I replied, surprised he didn't remember the date we'd discussed so many times during early pregnancy. Mid-November. Would it be all right if I came to the hospital when she's born? His voice held uncharacteristic hesitation. The question caught me off guard. Despite everything, I hadn't considered how we would handle Lily's birth. The thought of James witnessing that intimate moment after his betrayal was uncomfortable, yet completely excluding him from the birth of his daughter seemed unnecessarily punitive. You can come after, I decided. Once she's been born and I've had some time with her, my mother will be with me during labor. Relief flickered across his face. Thank you. I know you don't owe me that. This isn't about what's owed, James. It's about what's right for Lily. She deserves to know her father even if our marriage couldn't survive your choices. He flinched at the directness of my statement but didn't argue. For what it's worth, Ellie, I am sorry. Not just for being caught, but for what I did. You deserved better. Yes, I agreed simply. I did. As I stood to leave, gathering the signed agreement and my purse, James remained seated, looking smaller somehow against the expensive leather sofa we had chosen together when we first moved in. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of nostalgia for the life we had planned. The family holidays, shared milestones, growing old together. But that vision had been built on an illusion of who James was, or perhaps who I had needed him to be. "Goodbye, James," I said, my voice gentle despite everything. "I'll have my brother help with moving my things this weekend." "Ellie," he called as I reached the doorway. "Did you ever love me? Really love me? Not just the idea of us?" I paused, considering the question with the honesty it deserved. "Yes," I finally answered. "I loved the man I thought you were. The problem is that man never fully existed except in my mind." With that truth between us, I left the room and our marriage behind, stepping into the cool evening air with a sense of completion rather than loss. The chapter of my life that included James Morgan as my husband was closing, but the story of Ellie Chen was far from over. In fact, the most important chapters were just beginning to unfold. The move to my new apartment happened swiftly, with clinical efficiency that matched my emotional state. My brother Michael and 2 of his friends handled the heavy lifting, transferring my carefully inventoried belongings from the home I had shared with James to a sleek high-rise in the Seaport District, less than 10 minutes from Waterfront Plaza. The timing seemed fitting. My new home overlooked the same harbor visible from James's office window, though from a different vantage point. A metaphor for our separate futures, connected by proximity, but viewing the same landscape from fundamentally different perspectives. The apartment had been a fortunate find, a 3-bedroom corner unit on the 14th floor, recently renovated with the kind of thoughtful touches that would accommodate life with a newborn. The building's amenities included 24-hour security, an on-site gym with prenatal fitness classes, and most importantly, a community of professional women, many of whom were also navigating motherhood alongside demanding careers. The leasing agent had proudly highlighted this last feature during my tour, noting that impromptu playdates and childcare swaps were common among residents. As Michael assembled the crib in what would become Lily's nursery, I arranged my home office, positioning my desk to face the harbor. Unlike our previous home, where my workspace had been tucked into a small alcove off the kitchen, an afterthought in the floor plan, much like James's regard for my career, this office commanded the same square footage as the primary bedroom. Floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the space with natural light, while built-in shelving provided ample room for the business and legal references I consulted regularly. "This place suits you," Michael observed, leaning against the doorframe after completing the nursery furniture. At 35, 2 years my senior, my brother had always been my staunchest ally, from childhood playground disputes to adult professional challenges. "It feels like you, not like a compromise." "It is," I agreed, adjusting the monitor on my desk. For the first time since business school, I made housing decisions based solely on what I wanted, not what would accommodate someone else's preferences. Michael nodded, understanding exactly what I meant. He had never quite warmed to James, maintaining a polite but distant relationship with my husband, despite James's efforts to forge a closer connection. I'd attributed this to typical brotherly protectiveness, but now wondered if Michael had sensed something in James's character that I had missed or chosen to ignore. "Mom called while you were directing the movers," he said. "She's bringing dinner. Around 6. Dad's coming too, but he's stopping at the office first." I smiled, unsurprised by my mother's immediate, practical response to my changed circumstances. Grace Chen's love language had always been acts of service, particularly providing food during transitions. When I'd left for college, she'd stocked my mini fridge with homemade meals. When I graduated, she'd catered my celebration dinner herself, rather than trusting a restaurant. Now, facing impending single motherhood and divorce, I would receive the same care, practical support wrapped in culinary comfort. "Did she say what she's bringing?" I asked, already anticipating the answer. 3-cup chicken, vegetable dumplings, and red bean soup," Michael replied with a knowing grin. "Your pregnancy cravings menu." "Perfect," I sighed, my stomach rumbling in anticipation. The traditional Taiwanese dishes my mother prepared had been my constant craving throughout pregnancy, their familiar flavors offering comfort during months of emotional turmoil. By 6 o'clock, the apartment was transformed from a collection of boxes and furniture into a functional, if not fully settled, home. The essential spaces were organized: bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, and nursery, with the living areas still awaiting the personal touches that would make them truly mine. My parents arrived precisely on time, my father carrying a potted orchid wrapped in gold foil, my mother balancing insulated containers that released enticing aromas when opened. "Aya, you're too thin," she declared upon seeing me, despite clear evidence to the contrary in my 7-month pregnant form. "Babies need fat to grow properly." She immediately began arranging dishes on the dining table, her movements efficient and purposeful. My father, more reserved but equally concerned, surveyed the apartment with an architect's eye. "Good building," he pronounced after his inspection. "Solid construction, quality finishes. The security system is acceptable, though we should upgrade. The door locks." I accepted both their forms of care with grateful understanding. My mother would nurture through food. My father would ensure physical safety. Neither would directly address the emotional aspects of my situation until I signaled readiness for that conversation. During dinner, we discussed practical matters: the remaining items to be moved, nursery preparations, my maternity leave arrangements. It wasn't until after the meal, as we lingered over tea in the living room, that my mother finally broached the subject of James. "Has he signed all the papers?" she asked, her English still carrying traces of the accent she had never fully shed despite 40 years in Boston. "Yes," I confirmed. "The divorce filing will be processed next week." Everything was as Diana predicted. He didn't contest any terms once he understood his position. My father snorted softly. "He may be a lawyer, but he is not smart. Only a fool risks what he had." "Richard," my mother admonished gently, though her expression suggested agreement. She turned back to me, her gaze direct but compassionate. "And the baby arrangements? He will not make problems?" "No," I assured her. "The visitation schedule is standard for his situation. Supervised visits until Lily is 6 months old, then gradually increasing time as appropriate. He's accepted everything." What I didn't share was how easily James had capitulated to terms that many divorcing fathers would have fought vigorously. His quick acquiescence suggested either genuine remorse or, more likely, recognition of how thoroughly I had outmaneuvered him professionally. Either way, the outcome benefited Lily, which was all that mattered to me now. "Good," my father said, decisively. "Now we look forward, not back. The Chen women are strong. You will raise a strong daughter." His simple statement, delivered with absolute conviction, touched me more deeply than elaborate expressions of sympathy would have. My father had always viewed adversity as an opportunity for growth rather than a cause for pity. His confidence in my resilience was exactly the support I needed. As my parents prepared to leave, my mother pressed a final container into my hands. "Breakfast," she explained. "I will come tomorrow to help unpack kitchen things. Rest now." I hugged her tightly, inhaling the familiar scent of jasmine that had clung to her for as long as I could remember. "Thank you, Mom, for everything." "No need thanks between mother and daughter," she replied, patting my belly gently. "Soon you understand." After they departed, I stood in the entryway of my new home, absorbing the profound shift that had occurred in just a few days. A week ago, I had been Ellie Morgan, pregnant wife maintaining appearances while privately gathering evidence of betrayal. Now I was Elizabeth Chen again, single mother-to-be, property executive, and architect of my own redemption. The following morning, a Sunday, I woke early, my body clock still adjusted to James's preference for weekend productivity. For a moment, lying in unfamiliar surroundings, I felt the disorientation that accompanies major life changes. that brief suspension between old habits and new realities. Then Lily kicked emphatically, as if reminding me we were forging a new path together, and the momentary uncertainty vanished. I spent the morning organizing my closet, deliberately hanging my maternity business attire at the front, a visual reminder of my commitment to maintaining professional momentum even as motherhood approached. By the time my mother arrived at 11, I had established a new sense of order in my personal space. We worked together effortlessly, arranging kitchen implements according to function and frequency of use. My mother approved of the kitchen's layout, particularly the wide island, that would allow me to prepare meals while keeping an eye on Lily once she was mobile. As we unpacked dishes, she shared stories of my early childhood, tales of my determination to feed myself despite the mess it created, my insistence on helping with cooking from age 3, my methodical approach to organizing toys that had amused and occasionally exasperated her. "You were always your own person," she observed, carefully placing stemware in glass-fronted cabinets. "Even as tiny girl, you had strong ideas. This is why I am not worried for you now. You will make good life with Lily." Her confidence warmed. Me, though, I wondered if she truly understood the challenges ahead. "It won't be easy, Mom. Single parenting while managing my career, especially with a newborn." She dismissed this concern with a practiced wave. "Nothing worthwhile is easy, but difficult is not impossible." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "I was alone with Michael when he was baby. Your father traveled 6 months for big project in Taiwan. Different situation, yes, but same challenge." This revelation surprised me. My parents had never mentioned this period of separation. I didn't know that. "How did you manage?" "One day at time," she replied simply. "I made schedule, found good help, built routine. When your father returned, we adjusted again." She smiled at the memory. "Life always changes. Success comes from adapting, not from perfect circumstances." Her pragmatic wisdom resonated with me. I had been focusing on the disadvantages of my situation, rather than recognizing my considerable advantages. Financial security, professional flexibility, supportive family, and most importantly, the clarity that comes from facing betrayal and choosing self-respect over false security. By mid-afternoon, the kitchen was fully functional, with cooking essentials arranged according to my mother's efficient system. As she prepared to leave, promising to return the following weekend with more home-cooked meals for my freezer, she handed me a small red envelope. "Wedding money your grandmother gave you," she explained. "I kept safe all these years. Traditional gift for first child. Use for Lily." Inside was a substantial sum in crisp hundreds, along with a jade pendant on a delicate gold chain. "Mom, this is too much," I protested. "Not too much," she corrected firmly. "Just right for new beginning. Jade protects mother and child. You wear until Lily comes, then keep for her." I slipped the necklace over my head, the cool stone settling just below my collarbone. "Thank you. I'll treasure it." After my mother left, I dedicated the remainder of the day to setting up my home office. Unlike the kitchen organization, which had followed my mother's established patterns, this space would reflect my professional identity exclusively. I arranged reference materials by subject, set up dual monitors for efficient work from home, and positioned my professional certifications where they would be visible during video conferences. The final touch was a framed photograph, not of family or friends, but of the waterfront plaza at sunset, its glass facade reflecting golden light across the harbor. I placed it on the wall opposite my desk, a daily reminder of both professional achievement and personal reclamation. Monday morning arrived with a new rhythm. Instead of coordinating schedules with James over breakfast, I enjoyed the simple pleasure of planning my day according to my own priorities. After a light meal and prenatal yoga stretches, I dressed in one of my favorite maternity ensembles. a structured navy dress with a matching blazer that projected authority despite my obviously pregnant state. My first appointment was at Bennett Law, ostensibly to discuss renovation logistics with their office manager. The real purpose, however, was to establish my visible presence in the building as its owner rather than as James's wife. The psychological impact of this appearance wasn't lost on me. Lawyers who had previously known me only in social settings would now encounter me in a position of significant influence over their professional environment. As I entered the building's soaring lobby, I noticed subtle differences in how security and reception staff greeted me. The standard "Good morning, Mrs. Morgan" had been replaced with a respectful "Good morning, Ms. Chen" and an immediate offer of assistance. News of my professional identity had clearly circulated throughout the building staff. The elevator ride to Bennett Law's reception area gave me a moment to center myself. This would be my first time in James's workplace since discovering his affair, and while I had orchestrated this meeting deliberately, I still felt a flutter of apprehension. Not about seeing James, he remained on administrative leave, but about navigating the complex social dynamics of a space where gossip had undoubtedly flourished. Bennett's reception area occupied the entire elevator lobby of the 26th floor, with commanding views of the harbor through glass walls. The firm had spared no expense in creating an impression of established success. Original artwork, custom furnishings, and a massive living wall of tropical plants that required its own specialized maintenance team. As I approached the reception desk, I noted 3 associates in a corner seating area, their conversation halting abruptly when they recognized me. "Ms. Chen," the receptionist greeted me professionally, though I detected a hint of curiosity in her expression. "Mr. Daniels is expecting you. I'll let him know you've arrived." Robert Daniels, Bennett's facilities manager, appeared moments later, extending his hand with the practiced cordiality of someone accustomed to managing delicate situations. "Ms. Chen, thank you for coming in person. We appreciate your attention to our concerns about the renovation timeline." "Of course," I replied easily. "Harborview prioritizes clear communication with all our tenants, especially during transitional periods." As he led me through the main corridor toward the conference room, I maintained a deliberately measured pace, allowing staff we passed to register my presence. Most nodded politely, though a few seemed unsure of the appropriate greeting, a natural response to the unusual circumstance of the building owner also being the estranged wife of their colleague. The conference room Daniels had selected was, unfortunately, located directly across from James's office, its door now conspicuously closed with a temporary nameplate indicating file storage where his name had previously been displayed. Whether this room choice was coincidence or subtle office politics, I couldn't determine, but I refused to acknowledge the potential provocation. For the next hour, Daniels and I reviewed renovation schedules, temporary relocation plans, and accommodations for sensitive case files during construction. Throughout our discussion, I maintained strictly professional focus, referring occasionally to the building schematics spread between us while making notes on specific tenant requests. "These timelines seem reasonable," Daniels concluded after reviewing my proposed schedule. "Though I'm curious about the sequencing. Most renovations would begin with common areas rather than specific tenant spaces. Our engineering assessment identified the northwest corner systems as the highest priority due to efficiency losses," I explained, referencing the section that included James's former office. "Beginning there allows us to address the most problematic areas while developing protocols that will streamline the remainder of the project." He studied me for a moment, clearly weighing whether this explanation was genuine or whether the prioritization had more personal motivations. "I see. Well, we'll ensure that section is fully cleared by your start date. The files currently stored there can be relocated to our secondary storage facility." "Excellent." I gathered my materials efficiently. "Harborview appreciates Bennett's cooperation. We're committed to minimizing disruption to your operations throughout this process." As our meeting concluded and Daniels escorted me back toward the elevator bank, we encountered Bernard Hoffman emerging from his corner office. His momentary surprise at seeing me quickly transformed into professional courtesy. "Ms. Chen, what a pleasant surprise. I trust Robert has addressed all your concerns about our space needs during renovation?" "Yes, we've developed a workable timeline that should accommodate everyone's priorities," I replied. "Your team has been very cooperative." Bernard nodded approvingly before adding, "Perhaps you might have time for a brief word in my office? There's a tenant matter I'd like to discuss." Understanding this was more than a casual invitation, I agreed, following him into his spacious office while Daniels discreetly withdrew. Bernard closed the door before gesturing toward a seating area overlooking the harbor rather than the more formal arrangement at his desk. This subtle choice indicated a conversation that blended professional and personal matters. "How are you, Elizabeth?" he asked once we were seated, using my full name rather than the diminutive James always preferred. "Truly?" The question, asked with what seemed like genuine concern rather than professional obligation, momentarily disarmed me. Most people in my orbit had been so focused on practical matters, the divorce, the pregnancy, the living arrangements, that few had inquired about my emotional well-being. "I'm adjusting," I answered honestly. "Creating new routines, focusing on preparations for the baby and my ongoing professional responsibilities." Bernard nodded thoughtfully. "I've been impressed with your composure throughout this situation. It can't have been easy, especially given the timing with your pregnancy." "Thank you. I've found that maintaining professional focus provides helpful structure during personal challenges." I shifted slightly, steering us back toward a more business-appropriate conversation. "You mentioned a tenant matter?" "Yes." Bernard straightened, recognizing my preference for professional boundaries. "The Ethics Committee has completed its review regarding James's situation. Given the circumstances, they've recommended significant changes to his position within the firm. Though I had anticipated this outcome, hearing it confirmed still triggered a complex emotional response. Not satisfaction or vindication, but a measured acknowledgement that actions have consequences, even for those accustomed to avoiding them. "I understand," I said carefully. "May I ask what those changes entail?" "Not for personal reasons, but because as your landlord, I should be aware of any modifications to personnel that might affect our space planning." Bernard's slight smile suggested he appreciated the diplomatic framing of my question. "Of course. James will be returning from administrative leave next week, but not to his previous position. He'll be reassigned to our compliance department, focusing on internal document review rather than client-facing work. This role requires less prestigious office space." The implication was clear. James was being demoted to a position with minimal visibility, reduced compensation, and significantly diminished status within the firm. Not terminated, which might have generated sympathy and allowed him to frame himself as a victim of circumstance, but effectively sidelined in a way that signaled the partner's disapproval while protecting the firm's interests. "I see," I replied, neutrally. "Will this reassignment affect your overall space requirements for the coming year?" "No, our headcount remains stable. We've already promoted another associate to fill James's previous client responsibilities." Bernard studied me for a moment before adding, "You're taking this rather well. Many in your position might feel more vindictive." "Vindictiveness requires emotional investment I can no longer afford," I explained. "My priorities are my daughter's well-being and my professional responsibilities. James's career trajectory is his own concern now." Bernard nodded slowly. A remarkably mature perspective, though I must admit, as someone who values the firm's reputation, I appreciate that your approach has kept what could have been a messy situation relatively contained. "A discretion benefits everyone involved," I agreed, "including Lily, which is my primary concern." As our conversation concluded and I prepared to leave, Bernard asked one final question. The renovations to our floor, particularly the timing of work on James's former office, was that a business decision based on engineering recommendations? I finished for him, my expression revealing nothing. Harborview always prioritizes operational efficiency. His knowing smile suggested he understood the multiple layers of that statement. Of course, we appreciate your professional approach to building management. Leaving Bennett Law, I felt a curious lightness despite the emotional complexity of navigating that space. I had entered as Elizabeth Chen, property executive and businesswoman, not as Ellie Morgan, betrayed wife. The distinction was crucial to my ongoing recovery and reinvention. As the elevator descended to the lobby, I received a text message from my doctor's office confirming my appointment for the following day, a routine prenatal checkup that would include another ultrasound to verify Lily's growth and position. Previously, these appointments had been tinged with disappointment when James canceled at the last minute or showed minimal interest in the development milestones. Now, I looked forward to experiencing them on my own terms, focusing entirely on connecting with my daughter without managing someone else's inconsistent engagement. In the gleaming lobby, I paused briefly, gazing up at the soaring atrium my company now owned. The building's value extended beyond its impressive financial returns or prime location. It represented a perfect symmetry of consequence. The very space where James had conducted his betrayal was now under my control, its future development guided by my decisions. Not because I had sought revenge, but because I had built something substantial while he had been focused on temporary gratification. The poetic justice wasn't lost on me, though I took no particular pleasure in it. Justice, after all, wasn't about emotional satisfaction. It was simply the natural rebalancing that occurs when truth emerges and reality reasserts itself over illusion. Stepping out into the crisp autumn air, I headed toward the harborside path that would lead to my new home. The October sun cast long shadows across the water, the shortening days a reminder that Lily's arrival in November would coincide with the season of longest nights. Yet I felt no apprehension about this symbolic timing. Darkness, after all, was merely the necessary counterpoint to light, the contrast that makes illumination meaningful and growth possible. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Michael. As I walked, "Hey sis," he greeted me when I answered. "How did the Bennett Law visit go? Any dramatic confrontations or swooning secretaries?" I laughed despite myself. My brother's irreverent humor had always been his way of diffusing tension. Disappointingly professional, though I did learn James is being demoted to document review in the compliance department. "Ouch," Michael replied, genuine appreciation in his tone. From rainmaker to paper pusher. That's got to hurt his ego more than losing the corner office. "I suppose," I acknowledged, though I felt no particular satisfaction in James's professional setbacks. His career trajectory, like so many aspects of our former life together, had become largely irrelevant to my daily concerns. "Anyway," Michael continued, "I'm calling because I found that specialty crib mattress you wanted. The organic one with the extra firm support. It's being delivered to your place tomorrow." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by his attention to this detail. The particular mattress had been recommended for newborn spinal development, but had proven difficult to source with supply chain delays. "You didn't have to handle that." "That's what uncles are for," he replied easily. "Besides, I've appointed myself official baby gear procurement officer. It's an important position with significant responsibilities." His playful assertion made me smile as I reached my building's entrance. "In that case, Officer Chen, I accept your assistance with gratitude." After ending the call, I paused in the lobby, taking a moment to appreciate the contrasting feelings of my day. The tension of navigating James's workplace balanced against the warmth of family support, the complexity of managing professional and personal boundaries offset by the simplicity of preparing for Lily's arrival. These contradictions no longer felt like emotional whiplash, but rather like the natural texture of a life fully lived. The betrayal that had initially seemed like an ending had instead become a beginning. Painful, certainly, but ultimately transformative in ways I was only beginning to understand. November arrived with unexpected warmth, as if Boston's typically harsh climate had decided to grant me one small mercy as my due date approached. At 38 weeks pregnant, every aspect of my life had narrowed to two focal points: final preparations for Lily's arrival and wrapping up critical work projects before my maternity leave. The renovations at Waterfront Plaza were progressing smoothly, with James's former office space now completely gutted and reconstructed into a modern conference center available to all building tenants. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. What had once been a private domain was now a communal resource, open and transparent. My obstetrician, Dr. Miranda Phillips, had scheduled weekly appointments to monitor my progress, each visit confirming what I already felt instinctively. Lily was healthy, strong, and impatient to make her entrance into the world. At my most recent checkup, Dr. Phillips had smiled as she measured my stomach. "She's dropped considerably since last week," she observed. "I wouldn't be surprised if she decides to arrive ahead of schedule." "Is that a concern?" I asked, instinctively resting my hand where I felt Lily's foot pressing against my ribs. "Not at all. You're full term, and everything looks perfect." "Have you finalized your birth plan?" I nodded, having spent considerable time contemplating how I wanted this pivotal experience to unfold. "My mother will be my primary support person. I'd like to labor naturally as long as possible, but I'm open to medical intervention if necessary." "And James?" she asked carefully, aware of our situation. "Will he be involved?" "We've agreed he can come after the birth," I explained, "not during labor." Dr. Phillips nodded approvingly. "Birth is intense enough without adding emotional complications. Your plan sounds well considered." She helped me sit up, her movements gentle but efficient. "Make sure your hospital bag is packed, and remember to call immediately if your water breaks or contractions become regular." That evening, I put the finishing touches on Lily's nursery, washing and arranging the tiny clothing my mother had purchased, a mix of practical stretchy sleepers and beautiful traditional Chinese outfits for special occasions. The nursery reflected my dual cultural identity: contemporary furniture with clean lines paired with delicate watercolor paintings of bamboo and cherry blossoms that my grandmother had created decades ago in Taiwan. As I folded miniature socks into a drawer, I felt a twinge of melancholy, not for my failed marriage, but for the idealized family experience I had once envisioned. I had imagined this moment differently, James beside me, both of us marveling at how small everything was, sharing anticipation and nervous excitement. Instead, I prepared for motherhood alone, supported by family, but missing the partnership I had believed would accompany this journey. The melancholy passed quickly, replaced by practical focus. I checked my hospital bag once more, confirming it contained everything on Dr. Phillips's recommended list, plus a few personal additions. The jade pendant my mother had given me, now strung on a longer chain to accommodate my expanded proportions, a framed ultrasound photo of Lily, and the comfort items I hoped would ease the labor process. My phone chimed with an incoming text from Diana Reed, my divorce attorney. Court date confirmed for January 15th. All preliminary paperwork accepted without contest. No appearances needed before then, unless circumstances change. This timing was ideal. The formal divorce proceedings would occur after Lily's birth and my initial recovery period. The separation agreement James had signed covered all immediate practicalities, including financial support and visitation parameters. The court appearance would merely finalize what was already functionally established. I replied with brief thanks, then noticed a second message that had arrived moments earlier from an unexpected source. Vanessa Parker, James's former secretary and affair partner. "I know this is inappropriate, but I needed to say this directly. To you. I'm truly sorry for the pain I caused. No excuses or justifications, just genuine regret for my actions and their impact on you. I've accepted a position in Chicago and am leaving Boston permanently. I wish you and your baby well. I stared at the message, unsure how to process this unexpected apology. Throughout the ordeal, I had deliberately avoided personalizing Vanessa's role, viewing her as a symptom rather than the cause of my marriage's collapse. James had made vows to me, not Vanessa. His betrayal carried the greater weight of responsibility. Still, her acknowledgement of harm done represented a rare moment of accountability in a situation where blame shifting was the more common response. After careful consideration, I composed a simple reply. Thank you for your apology. I wish you clarity in your future endeavors. Neither warm forgiveness nor cold dismissal, my response acknowledged her message while maintaining appropriate boundaries. Some actions cannot be undone, only learned from. I hoped for her sake that she would carry this lesson forward. That night, sleep proved elusive, my body restless with the discomforts of late pregnancy. Around 3 a.m, I abandoned my bed to pace the living room, the lights of Boston Harbor twinkling through floor-to-ceiling windows. Standing there, one hand supporting my lower back while the other cradled my protruding belly, I experienced a moment of profound clarity. Everything had changed, yet I remained fundamentally myself, perhaps more authentically myself than I had been in years. The betrayal that had initially felt like devastation had ultimately acted as a catalyst for reclamation. Without James's infidelity, I might have continued accommodating his subtle dismissals of my capabilities, slowly diminishing to fit his expectations. The painful revelation in the hospital parking lot had forced me to confront not just his betrayal, but my own complicity in becoming less than I was capable of being. As if responding to my realization, Lily shifted position, her movement creating visible ripples across my stretched skin. "We're going to be fine," I whispered to her. "Better than fine, actually. We're going to be exactly who we're meant to be." Around 6 that morning, I finally drifted into light sleep, only to be awakened 2 hours later by an unmistakable sensation, a tightening across my abdomen that felt different from the Braxton Hicks contractions I'd experienced in previous weeks. This had a purposeful quality, a distinct beginning, peak, and release. I remained calm, remembering Dr. Phillips' advice to time the contractions before calling. The second contraction arrived 14 minutes later, with similar intensity. I opened the contraction timing app I'd downloaded weeks earlier and began documenting each one, simultaneously texting my mother to alert her that labor might be starting. By 10 o'clock, the contractions had settled into a pattern of approximately 12 minutes apart, still mild enough that I could continue moving around the apartment, completing final preparations. My mother arrived within the hour, her demeanor shifting seamlessly from concerned parent to experienced birth support. She assessed me with knowing eyes, noting how I breathed through each contraction, then immediately suggested practical next steps. "We call doctor now," she said decisively. "Better to go to hospital early than wait too long. First babies sometimes surprise." Dr. Phillips agreed when I reached her office, advising me to proceed to the hospital for evaluation. "Given your contraction pattern and first pregnancy, you have plenty of time," she reassured me. "But I'd rather monitor you there than have you waiting at home." The drive to Massachusetts General Hospital was surreal, morning traffic flowing around us as my body began the profound transformation from pregnancy to childbirth. Between contractions, I gazed out at the city, observing people rushing to meetings, grabbing coffee, engaged in ordinary Tuesday activities while my world narrowed to the rhythm of my body's ancient knowledge. At the hospital, the intake process proved efficient, my pre-registration and birth plan facilitating a smooth transition to a spacious delivery room with harbor views. A midwife named Elena performed the initial examination, her experienced hands gentle but thorough. "You're at 3 centimeters, she announced with an encouraging smile. Labor is definitely established, but you have a way to go. The good news is your baby is perfectly positioned and your vital signs are excellent. Are you planning to use pain medication? I'd like to try without initially, I explained, but I'm open to an epidural if necessary. Perfect approach. Elena approved. Let's get you comfortable and set up monitoring. Your mother is welcome to stay, of course. Anyone else joining you? No, I replied simply. Just my mother. If Elena had opinions about my birthing choices, she kept them professionally concealed, focusing instead on establishing my comfort and explaining the monitoring equipment that would track Lily's heartbeat and my contractions. Once connected to the necessary devices, my mother and I settled into a rhythm, walking the room during breaks between contractions, practicing breathing techniques during the increasingly intense waves. Time adopted a strange elasticity, stretching and contracting in parallel with my body. What felt like minutes might have been hours. What seemed endless sometimes passed in moments. The clinical environment faded to background noise as I turned inward, connecting with an instinctive knowledge that transcended my analytical mind. By mid-afternoon, the contractions had intensified significantly, coming every 4 minutes with a force that required my complete concentration. Dr. Phillips arrived to check my progress, her presence reassuring amid the increasingly demanding physical experience. 7 centimeters, she confirmed after examining me. You're progressing beautifully, Ellie. How are you feeling about pain management? The question coincided with a particularly powerful contraction that momentarily robbed me of speech. When it passed, leaving me breathless and trembling, I reassessed my initial plan. I think I'd like the epidural now, I decided, recognizing that exhaustion might complicate the pushing stage if I didn't manage my energy effectively. The anesthesiologist arrived promptly, explaining the procedure with calm efficiency as I sat hunched forward, my mother steadying me through another contraction before the needle could be placed. The relief was gradual, but profound, transforming the overwhelming pain into manageable pressure without disconnecting me entirely from the birth process. Try to rest, Dr. Phillips advised once the epidural took effect. The final phase may come quickly, and you'll need your strength. My mother wiped my face with a cool cloth, murmuring encouragement in a mixture of English and Mandarin. Her presence anchored me, her unwavering support a testament to the maternal bond I would soon experience from the opposite perspective. As the pain receded, I found myself unexpectedly emotional, tears sliding silently down my cheeks. What's wrong? My mother asked, instantly concerned. Pain coming back? No, I assured her, struggling to articulate the complex emotions flooding through me. I'm just grateful you're here, that I'm not doing this alone. Her eyes softened with understanding. You are never alone, Ellie. Never. She placed her hand over mine where it rested on my belly. Family is strongest force, stronger than marriage sometimes, stronger than disappointment always. Her simple wisdom steadied me as we entered the most intense phase of labor. Despite the epidural, my body communicated clearly when transition began, the unmistakable urge to push overriding all other sensations. Dr. Phillips returned, confirming I had reached full dilation and coaching me through the pushing technique that would bring Lily into the world. What followed was the most physically demanding experience of my life, drawing on reserves of strength I hadn't known I possessed. Each push required complete concentration, an alignment of breath, muscle, and will focused on a single purpose. Between contractions, I gathered energy, anchored by my mother's unwavering support and Dr. Phillips' calm direction. The head is crowning, Dr. Phillips announced after what might have been minutes or hours of pushing. One more good push, Ellie, and you'll meet your daughter. Summoning every remaining ounce of strength, I bore down with the next contraction, feeling the indescribable sensation of Lily's body emerging into the world. The sudden release of pressure was followed immediately by a thin, indignant cry that transformed the clinical delivery room into a sacred space. "Here she is," Dr. Phillips said, placing the vernix-covered infant directly onto my chest. "Born at 7:42 p.m., perfect in every way." The world narrowed to this single point of contact. My daughter's warm, wet body against my skin, her cries softening as she adjusted to her new environment. Her eyes, surprisingly alert, seemed to focus on my face as I whispered a welcome, in the mixed language of tears and wonder that all new mothers speak. My mother, normally reserved with her emotions, wept openly beside us, one hand resting gently on Lily's back while the other clasped mine. "She has your determined chin," she observed, her voice thick with emotion. "Strong like her mother." The medical team worked efficiently around us, delivering the placenta, performing necessary assessments, and assisting with Lily's first nursing attempt. Through it all, I remained in a state of altered consciousness, aware of activities at the periphery but centered entirely on the perfect new being who had transformed me from woman to mother in a single transcendent moment. Later, after we had been transferred to a recovery room and Lily had been bathed, measured, and swaddled, my mother reluctantly prepared to leave, hospital policy allowing only one overnight visitor. "Your father waits in lobby," she explained. "He brings food for you. Real food, not hospital food." "He's been here all this time?" I asked, surprised. My father, though loving, typically expressed his care through practical support rather than extended bedside vigils. "Of course," she replied, as if his presence had never been in question. "Where else would grandfather be when granddaughter arrives?" After hugging me carefully and placing a feather-light kiss on Lily's forehead, she departed, promising to return in the morning with fresh clothes and additional necessities. Left alone with my daughter for the first time, I studied her features with wonder. The delicate arches of her eyebrows, the miniature perfection of her fingers with their transparent nails, the rosebud mouth that had already mastered the instinctive rooting that led to successful nursing. "Hello, Lily Grace Chen," I whispered, tracing one finger along her velvety cheek. "I've been waiting so long to meet you." Her eyes opened at the sound of my voice, dark blue newborn gaze, seeming to focus with unexpected intensity. In that moment of connection, the pain of recent months receded completely, replaced by a fierce protective love that transcended any previous emotional experience. Whatever challenges lay ahead, this profound bond would provide the strength to meet them. A gentle knock at the door interrupted our communion. Expecting a nurse for the routine vital checks, I called a soft welcome without looking up from Lily's face. Only when I heard the hesitant footsteps did I realize my visitor wasn't medical staff. James stood awkwardly in the doorway, wearing a suit that suggested he had come directly from work, a small gift bag dangling from one hand. His expression combined awe, uncertainty, and something that might have been regret as he gazed at our daughter. "I know we agreed I'd come tomorrow," he said quietly, "but my mother called when she heard you were in labor. I thought, is it all right if I meet her now? I won't stay long." The James before me seemed markedly different from the confident attorney who had orchestrated both a professional rise and marital betrayal with equal calculation. His demeanor reflected the comprehensive recalibration of his circumstances: demoted at work, divorced at home, and facing the reality of limited paternal rights to the child he had so casually deprioritized during pregnancy. 6 months earlier, I would have derived satisfaction from his evident discomfort. Now, holding Lily, I felt only a calm certainty that all outcomes had unfolded as they should. James would always be Lily's biological father, but his role in her life would be determined by his choices moving forward, not by the legal technicalities of our separation. "You can come in," I said, adjusting Lily's position so he could see her face. "She just fell asleep, but you can still look at her." He approached cautiously, setting the gift bag on a side table before leaning over to study the swaddled infant. "She's beautiful," he whispered, voice catching. "She looks like you." "The nurses think she has your nose," I offered, a small kindness in a moment that clearly overwhelmed him. He nodded, seemingly unable to articulate his emotions. After a long moment, simply watching Lily sleep, he straightened and cleared his throat. "Thank you for letting me come. I know things between us." He trailed off, perhaps realizing there were no adequate words for our situation. "I want you to know I'm taking the parenting classes the mediator recommended, and I've found an apartment near the visitation center with a small second bedroom for when she's older." These practical steps toward responsible fatherhood, while basic, represented more effort than I had expected from him. Perhaps the comprehensive collapse of his carefully constructed life had prompted genuine reflection rather than mere resentment. "That's good, James. Lily deserves a father who makes her a priority." He flinched slightly at the implicit reminder of his previous failures, but didn't protest the assessment. Instead, he gestured toward the gift bag. "It's a music box, hand-carved. When you open it, it plays Brahms' Lullaby. I thought maybe when she's older." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "That's very appropriate." An awkward silence fell between us, the weight of our shared past and separate futures hanging in the small hospital room. Finally, James moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. "Ellie," he said softly, "I know it doesn't change anything, but I am sorry. For all of it." His gaze, when it met mine, held genuine regret. "You deserved better." "Yes," I agreed simply. "I did." After he left, I looked down at Lily, still peacefully sleeping against my chest, unaware of the complex adult dynamics surrounding her arrival. Her existence transcended the circumstances of my marriage's end, offering a new beginning built on love rather than betrayal. My father arrived shortly after James departed, bringing containers of my mother's carefully prepared postpartum recovery foods. Unlike James's hesitant approach, my father moved with confident purpose, setting up the meal on the adjustable table before producing a small red envelope. "For Lily," he explained, placing it beside the bed. "Traditional gift for new life." "You've already given so much, Dad," I protested gently. He shook his head firmly. "Different kind of gift. This is her first business investment." Curious, I opened the envelope to find documentation for a small ownership stake in Waterfront Plaza, placed in Lily's name through a trust. "Dad, this is too much." "No," he contradicted with unusual firmness. "It is exactly right. Chen women always have independent foundation. Your mother had property from her family. You have your career. Lily will have this." His expression softened as he gazed at his granddaughter. "Building where truth was discovered becomes building where future begins." Good symmetry. The profound wisdom in his gesture moved me deeply. My father had transformed the site of betrayal into a legacy of empowerment, ensuring Lily would begin life with both emotional and financial security, independent of her father's involvement. That night, alone with my daughter in the quiet hospital room, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had led to this moment. 6 months earlier, standing in a hospital parking lot watching my husband kiss another woman, I could never have imagined the strength, clarity, and ultimate joy that would emerge from that painful revelation. The betrayal that had seemed like an ending had instead been a beginning, painful but necessary, clearing the path for a more authentic life. In losing the husband who had never fully seen or valued me, I had reclaimed the woman who needed no external validation to recognize her worth. In discovering James's deception, I had rediscovered my own capacity for strategic thinking, emotional resilience, and ultimately, transformative love. As Lily stirred against my chest, her tiny hand escaping the swaddle to rest against my skin, I made her a silent promise. She would grow up witnessing a mother who stood in her full power, who created success on her own terms, who understood that relationships should enhance rather than diminish one's authentic self. Whatever challenges life presented, she would face them knowing that adversity could be transformed into advantage with sufficient courage, clarity, and strategic patience. Outside the hospital window, the lights of Boston Harbor sparkled across. The water, including those of Waterfront Plaza, standing tall among the city's architectural landscape. The building represented more than a professional achievement or symbolic justice. It embodied the principle that would guide Lily's upbringing, that we create most value when we build rather than destroy, when we transform difficulty into opportunity, when we recognize that the most powerful response to betrayal is not revenge, but reinvention. Morning arrived with soft winter light filtering through the hospital blinds, illuminating Lily's sleeping face. Today, we would go home, to our apartment, beginning the daily rhythms of our new life together. The path ahead would undoubtedly include challenges, from the practical demands of single motherhood to the complex co-parenting relationship with James. Yet I face this future with neither fear nor resentment, but with the steady confidence that comes from weathering a perfect storm and emerging not merely intact, but fundamentally transformed. The nurse entered with discharge paperwork and final instructions, smiling at the peaceful tableau of mother and daughter. "Ready to go home?" she asked cheerfully. "More than ready," I replied, gazing down at Lily with absolute certainty. "We have a wonderful life waiting." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.